Warning, the $500 billion appliance lie exposed. Your $20 washer bearings are sealed in a $600 tub. And the e-waste from this scam keeps burning in landfills. I mean, seriously, my washing machine needs a digital handshake to accept a new pump. It's laundry, not a high-security server. No code dance, no spin, just a sulking robot guarding your socks. This isn't bad luck. It's a rigged system that can bleed a family for $40,000 to $50,000 over a couple decades. Today, we'll expose how planned failure got written into hardware and law, and show you the simple moves to break the cycle without going broke. Subject, world, central question. Picture a Saturday morning like 1,000 others. Kids, uniforms in the washer, coffee cooling on the counter. Then the beep, the kind that turns your stomach. The machine freezes, flashes a code, and now you're Googling while the drum sloshes. You try the hard reset, you unplug it, you swear at it. Nothing. It worked yesterday, today it's a statue. Now the clock starts. You've got a game at noon, work shirts to dry, and a choice. Wait a week for a tech or burn half a day at a laundromat, and the tech isn't cheap. He'll tell you what you already suspect. Some tiny part failed, but the part lives inside something you can't open. It's sealed, he says, like that's normal. He offers a quote that sounds like a car repair. You laugh because what else do? You ask if it's under warranty. It was, last week. This isn't bad luck. This is the new normal. Appliances that used to be simple machines now act like locked phones with water lines. The knobs and belts we grew up with, swapped for control boards, sensors, and code. On paper, that sounds like progress. Quieter, smarter, more efficient. In practice, it means the simplest fix is behind glue, paired to software, and priced to push you toward just replace it. So the world we're in looks like this. Your fridge talks to Wi-Fi, your dryer has a microprocessor, and your dishwasher throws an unrecoverable fault for a sensor hiccup. Parts don't just fit anymore, they need permission. The board has to know the fan. The pump has to shake hands with the controller. If it doesn't, the machine sulks and refuses to run. And even when the part is cheap, the design turns it into a major surgery. Bearings wear out, which they always do. But instead of pressing in a $20 set, you're buying a sealed tub for hundreds, plus labor that makes a new unit look sensible. Here's the gut punch. Average lifespan slid. The stout refrigerators your grandparents bought in the 1950s often ran 15 to 20 years. Today, 7 to 10 is sold as normal. You might be surprised to learn how that math lands at home. Over a couple decades, between washers, dryers, fridges, and dishwashers, the churn can bleed a family for $40,000 to $50,000. Not for upgrades you wanted, just to stay even. And the pile doesn't just drain wallets. It stacks up behind the store. Appliances now count as e-waste because those smart guts turn them into mixed material headaches. In 2022, the world dumped about 62 million tons of e-waste. A lot of that doesn't get neatly recycled into shiny new steel. Some of it burns, some of it leaks, some of it gets shipped as used goods and arrives dead on the dock. So the central question is simple and ugly. Is failure baked in by design and by law? Because if it's just random, we shrug and buy extended warranties. But if it's deliberate architecture, held in place by rules and software walls, then we've been drafted into a business model we never agreed to. Let's be honest, most of us don't want to think about this. We just want cold milk, clean shirts, and a dishwasher that doesn't stop at 9 minutes with a cryptic beep. We aren't trying to do mechanical archaeology at midnight. We just want to fix stuff when it breaks, or pay someone local who can. But the world we've got makes that hard on purpose. Warranty void, stickers glare even though the 1975 Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act says they don't hold water. Service manuals hide behind portals. Diagnostic software sits on a server with a price tag big enough to scare off small shops. And when you finally find the part, it's serialized, so your machine gives it the silent treatment. Meanwhile, something else is happening. Over in Europe, lawmakers looked at this spiral and said, enough. They wrote rules that say you have a right to parts, to documentation, to designs that can come apart without a heat gun. France even put a repairability index on the shelf starting January 1st, 2021, 1 to 10, right on the tag, so you can see if you're buying a future paperweight. We'll get there, but to understand how we walked into this mess, we need to go back. Not to the 1990s. All the way to a December meeting in Geneva, 1924, where a room of lighting executives quietly changed how long a thing should last. Because once you see that playbook, you'll start spotting it everywhere, from light bulbs to washing machines with motherboards that behave like bouncers. And that's when the story stops feeling random and starts feeling rigged. Pillar 1, the 1920s conspiracy, birth of planned failure. 3 floors up in a Geneva office on December 23, 1924, men in winter coats hang their hats, sit down and draw a line through an engineer's dream. Their companies make light bulbs, Osram, Philips, General Electric through a British arm, and they've got a problem. Bulbs last too long, people aren't buying fast enough. So they form Phoebus SA, a cartel with a simple rule dressed up as standards. Every bulb will live around 1,000 hours. Make it last longer, pay a fine. They even built test labs to measure it. Here's where it gets crazy. Up to then, the game was bragging rights, who could make the longest-lasting bulb without dimming it. You might be surprised to learn that early incandescent bulbs were easily clearing 1,500, 2,000 hours, sometimes way more. The cartel flips that pride into paperwork. Engineers are told, hit 1,000 or you're costing the company. And it worked. In 1929, according to later research, there were hundreds of thousands of Swiss francs in penalties for overperforming lamps. Imagine that meeting. Your team gets punished for building too well. Why does a light bulb meeting matter for your washer? Because that day locked in a profit math that beats craft. If you can smooth demand by shortening life, forecasts get clean, factories run steady, and shareholders smile. Reliability turns from a selling point into a risk, so companies start designing to a target lifespan, not to the limit of materials. They call it standardization and efficiency. Consumers call it, well, they didn't have a word for it yet. Marketing picks up the slack. New equals better, old equals dumb. If you kept a stout, heavy appliance from the 1930s, you weren't thrifty, you were behind, and the parts changed to back that story. Metal housings give way to lighter alloys than plastics. Rivets and bolts swapped for clips and tabs. Repairable assemblies become sealed units. You can say it's progress because costs fall and products get sleek. But it also means fewer screws you can actually turn, and more pieces you have to replace wholesale. Meanwhile, something else was happening in the background. Law. In the United States, antitrust heat hits General Electric for broader anti-competitive behavior in the 1940s and 1950s. The Phoebus arrangement, planned to run until 1955, effectively collapses as World War II scrambles supply chains and governments take over production priorities. But the idea that too durable is a threat to revenue doesn't die with it. It just goes quiet, then shows up in softer forms, model years, styling refreshes. Improved features that nudge you every few years. Get this, appliance makers watched and learned. Early washing machines and fridges were basically farm equipment in a cabinet. Motors, belts, bearings you could swap with hand tools. Repair was normal. Then the incentives nudge design. Service access shrinks, sub-assemblies fuse. The bearing example we hit earlier. That starts as a metal tub with a replaceable race and grease. Over time, it morphs into a sealed plastic tub with the bearings molded in. It's lighter, cheaper to assemble, and a nightmare to fix. If it fails, you don't press a $20 part, you buy a $600 tub. Here's a micro story. 1958, a neighborhood shop keeps a drawer of universal oven thermostats. Mrs. Alvarez walks in with a part number, pays a few bucks, her stove runs that night. Fast forward to the 1980s, now there's a kit, but it's still swappable. By the 2000s, the thermostat logic sits on a board that also runs the display, the timer, and the lock. A surge or a little moisture and the whole board is toast. You call the shop. They can order it, sure, but the cost makes you pause. And that's before we even hit software. What nobody in Geneva could see was the chip. When electronics got cheap enough to land in every hinge and hose, the old Phoebus instinct finally found its perfect host. You don't even need a cartel when firmware can set the rules and error codes can gate the fix. The 1,000-hour trick becomes a 1,000-cycle secret, quality window, buried in thermal tolerances, glue choices, and how aggressive the control logic is when it detects a fault. Officially, it's all about safety and energy savings. Unofficially, the replacement cycle got very tidy. To be fair, not every design choice is a mustache twirl. Plastics cut cost and weight. Digital controls can save water and power. But the line between smart efficiency and planned churn is where you bury simple, field-serviceable parts inside sealed, proprietary boxes, then sell new as the only rational option. That line shows up first in a cartel's minute book. After that, it hides in glossy brochures. So when your washer flashes a code and stares you down, remember the room in 1924. Remember the fines for making something last. That's the playbook. The analog version set the tone. The digital version, Motherboards, locks, pairings, turns the tone into policy, and we're about to meet it up close. The motherboard kill switch when hardware becomes policy. So the chip shows up, and suddenly the front panel isn't just buttons, it's a gatekeeper. The old start switch you could test with a multimeter, replaced by a control board with a microcontroller and firmware you'll never see. Here's the twist. The board doesn't just run the cycle, it enforces policy. That's what error locks are. Software saying, nope, not today, even when the hardware's fine. Get this, your washer senses a small imbalance. In a belt and pulley world, it would wobble, maybe walk a little, then finish. In the board world, the algorithm panics, tosses a code, and slams the brakes. Some machines throw unrecoverable faults that only a service mode can clear. You can't start a rinse. You can't even open the door. The machine becomes a bouncer outside its own club. Meanwhile, simple parts became time bombs because they got buried and glued. Bearings always wear. That's normal. But when the tub is sealed, the cheap failure turns into a $600 assembly plus labor. The board knows that repair math. It nudges you gently toward replacement. And because the same board oversees pumps, heaters, locks, and sensors, a little steam in the wrong place can knock out half the machine. Moisture plus heat equals ghost faults. The board sees noise and calls it doom. Here, as where parts pairing slides in, you swap a pump, the connector fits, the flow is right. But the control board checks the new part serial, doesn't see an authorized ID, and refuses to run. It's like a car key fob that needs programming, except it's your washer drain pump. Some brands require a handshake routine, service software to pair the new component. No pairing, no spin. And that software isn't on a public download page. It's in a dealer portal, behind training fees and dongles. You might be surprised to learn this logic even touches basics like door locks and fans. The board expects a certain draw from the motor, a certain impedance from the sensor. If it's a hair off, it flags out of range and shuts you down. On paper, it's safety and quality control. In practice, it weaponizes tolerance. The zone where it still works used to be wide. Now it's a tight hallway guarded by software. Manufacturers pitch this as subscription thinking, pay to unlock. Want the high-temp sanitized mode? Some models ship it disabled until you buy the upgrade. Want to run diagnostics? There's a code dance for that, or a paid app. Even ice makers get cute, consumables tied to chips that say, use genuine or else. Because apparently your filter needs digital trust now. Let's talk lifespan signals. In the 1950s, fridges commonly ran 15 to 20 years. Today, 7 to 10 is called normal. Energy standards improved, sure. But the drop maps cleanly onto the age of the board. Control panels fail from heat cycling. Capacitors dry out. Conformal coatings miss a corner and steam creeps in. The fix isn't a 50-cent switch. It's a new board at $200, maybe $300 if you can even get it. And if you replace it, you sometimes still need to calibrate the pressure sensor or the weight algorithm. Which means, yeah, more software. Meanwhile, something else is happening in the guts. Cheap brushless motors save power but rely on the board's driver chips. One spike, one brownout, and the driver fries. The motor's fine, the brain isn't. Pumps use pressed shafts and thin bushings to hit a price point. They grind themselves into gritty slurry that throws metal dust into the sump, and the board watches current climb, thinks stall, and trips a fatal code. It's not just failure, it's failure with ceremony. Here's a micro story. A small shop owner gets a call, dishwasher won't drain. He finds a sock thread wrapped on the impeller, clears it, machine tests fine. But the board logged a pump overcurrent critical and now needs a reset only the brand's tool can do. He can't buy the tool without a license. The license costs more than a month's rent. He tells the customer the pump runs, but the board won't forgive. She asks, so I need a new machine? He shrugs. She buys one. To be fair, boards aren't evil. They cut water use. They balance loads better than a brick ever could. They keep heaters from running dry. Real safety, real savings. But watch how often the design adds glue where screws would do, or buries hot components in plastic with no air path, or mounts a board under a damp top panel with a vent right above it. That's not fate, that's a choice. And then there's documentation. The service manual that tells you how to clear the hard fault, or how to teach the board the new hall sensor. Not in the box, not on the brand site. It's in a restricted library. So the board sets the rule, the brand holds the key, and you stand there with a machine that technically works but won't. This was the moment everything changed. Hardware stopped failing alone. It started failing with policy attached. You didn't just lose a bearing, you lost permission. And even if you could swap the part, the machine might not accept it without that handshake. You paid to own it, but the board keeps the last word. which raises a gnarly question. What if fixing it isn't just harder? What if it's not allowed? The death of the repairman, locks, laws, and licensing. So what happens when the machine fails with policy attached? You reach for a screwdriver and hit a wall of warnings. Warranty void if removed. Big black letters. Looks official, right? Here's the thing. In the United States, the 1975 Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act makes those scare stickers basically empty threats. A company can't void your whole warranty just because you opened the case. They have to prove your work caused the damage. But most people don't know that, so the sticker does its job. It freezes your hand. And behind the sticker is a second wall, parts pairing. We touched it before, but in practice it's brutal. A tiny EEPROM on the board stores serials. The new pump plugs in, spins fine, but the board doesn't see the right ID, so it refuses to clear the code. Some brands require a dealer tool to pair fans, locks, even filters. A filter like the cartridge that keeps your ice cubes clear, ships with a chip. Use a third-party filter and the display screams at you, then throttles flow. Safety, they say. Quality, they say. It's also a toll booth. Here, S where the handshake turns into a chokehold. Your dishwasher now has more digital gatekeeping than a high-security server rack. No credentials, no login, no job. A clogged pump that you cleared, still blocked because the board wants an authorization token you can't issue. A perfectly good fan you installed, quarantined until a dealer app blesses the serial. Hardware failure used to be a busted part. Now it's a policy decision, written in firmware, that locks you out of your own property. I mean, seriously, your sink helper is basically running two-factor auth while your socks mold in the tub. Let's be honest, this is where small shops start dying. A mom-and-pop service outfit used to carry a van full of universal parts and a binder of diagrams. Now they need logins, tokens, and paid software to talk to a dishwasher. Access to diagnostic apps can run hundreds per year per brand, and that's if they'll even sell it to you. Some portals demand factory training, video certifications, NDAs, hoops built to slow the little guys while authorized networks locking calls. Here's a micro story. Tony's been fixing appliances since 1998. He knows the sound a failing bearing makes through a floor. Last winter, he replaced a dryer control board. The machine powers on, but it won't heat. The service manual, behind a portal, the fault. Heater disabled, authorization required. He calls the brand. They say only certified partners can enable that function. He's not in the club. He eats the call, apologizes to the customer, and she books a factory tech at triple the price. 2 weeks later, Tony's landlord raises rent. He stares at his wall of paper manuals from the 2000s and feels old for the first time. Manufacturers say they're protecting safety and intellectual property. And sure, no one wants a hacked heater or a bad repair that burns a house. But watch how safety becomes a blanket. You ask for a wiring diagram, they say it's proprietary. You ask for service mode instructions, they say it could be misused. You ask for a parts list, they say the assembly is non-serviceable. Meanwhile, the exact same info exists, but only on a paid platform for insiders. And there's a third wall, licensing. Some states require appliance servicers to carry specialty licenses and insurance structured for big companies, not solo techs. On its face, that's about consumer protection, but pair it with expensive tools and secret docs and the effect is clear. Independent repair thins out. Service maps turn into deserts. If you live outside a major city, the first available appointment is 10 days from now, 4-hour window. Must be home, flat fee that already sounds like half a new machine. While that was happening in the field, warranties themselves changed shape. Extended warranties flood checkout counters because actuarial math works in the brand's favor. The base warranty shrinks to a year on labor, maybe 2 on parts. If the failure is non-covered, like water damage from a leak you couldn't know about, you're out. And remember, if you opened it, the rep might tell you you're done, even though the law says otherwise. Most folks won't fight. They don't have time to argue the Federal Trade Commission's policy with a call center. Meanwhile, something else was happening in online marketplaces. Parts listings blur OEM and third-party. Serial locks mean a cheap replacement might physically fit but never take. So you buy twice, return once, wait a week. In that week, laundry piles up and your brain starts doing replacement math. Stores know this. Free delivery tomorrow, haul away included. It's not an accident that the easiest path out is the one that sells you another machine. Let's be fair, there are good techs inside authorized networks who care and fix what they can. But they work under time quotas and parts policies written by finance teams. Swap, don't troubleshoot. Replace the assembly, not the relay. Because if you open the board and swap a $2 capacitor, you've created liability the company can't price. So the policy says no. the machine could be saved. The policy won't let it. And the human cost. It's not just money, it's dignity. Your grandfather fixed things in the driveway. Your neighbor used to borrow a socket set and help. Now you're locked out of your own washer by a software flag. You call 3 shops, 2 don't answer, 1 says they can't get the tool. You haul bags to a laundromat on a Wednesday night and feed quarters into a machine built like your old one, metal, simple, no handshake required. You look around and think, why can't I buy this for home? What nobody knew at the time, back when the first stickers went on, was how fast it would hollow out a craft. The death of the repairman isn't a single law or a single lock. It's a stack. Scary labels, secret docs, paired parts, pricey tools, tight licenses, and warranties that lean hard on fear. One at a time, each seems reasonable. Together, they make repair rare, slow, and expensive. And when repair dies, everything else gets easier. The European Revolt, harder to repair, goes live. While all that was hardening in the States, something different was brewing across the Atlantic. Lawmakers kept hearing the same story from families and fixers. Stuff breaks too soon, and you can't fix it even when it's simple. So they did something that sounds small but cuts deep. They wrote rules that make repair the default, not the exception. Right to repair, in plain words, means this. If a company sells your product, they can't trap the fix. They've got to make spare parts, repair info, and diagnostic tools available for a real stretch of years, often 7 to 10 at fair prices. They have to design with disassembly in mind, so a tech can reach the part without melting glue or breaking plastic welds. And they can't hide the how-to behind proprietary if that's the only way to make it work again. France put teeth on the shelf. Starting January 1st, 2021, stores had to show a repairability index on certain products: washing machines, smartphones, laptops, TVs, lawn tools, 1 to 10, big and bold. It isn't perfect, and yes, manufacturers self-score within a government formula, but it moves power to the moment of choice. You're standing in a store, 2 washers cost the same, one has a 5.4, the other an 8.2. You don't need a YouTube rabbit hole to guess which one you'll be able to keep alive. Here's a fun fact: those scores force design conversations upstream. To hit a higher number, brands have to prove parts availability windows, provide service manuals, show that disassembly doesn't need exotic tools, and price parts reasonably compared to the product. Documentation becomes a checkbox, not a favor. Fasteners become screws you can turn, not rivets you drill. That tiny switch from glue to gasket and bolts bumps a score. Consumers notice. Sales shift. Suddenly, there's money in being fixable. You might be surprised to learn what happened next. Local repair in France didn't just get busier, it got normal again. Estimates from advocacy groups and shop networks show repair rates rising roughly 20% in that first stretch, because parts showed up, manuals existed, and people could compare fixability at the point of sale. Jobs followed. Small electronics bars and appliance counters started offering same-week fixes, not because they found a secret, but because the lock wasn't there anymore. Meanwhile, at the EU level, policy kept clicking forward. Echoed sign rules had already nudged energy and water efficiency. Then they added service life into the brief. For categories like washing machines and dishwashers, manufacturers have to stock key parts for years after a model stops selling. Think door gaskets, pumps, motors, shock absorbers, even control knobs. And they must provide access to repair information for professional shops. Not just the glossy user manual, but exploded diagrams, fault code lists, and test procedures. No more shrugging and saying, non-serviceable. Get this, design for disassembly isn't a slogan there, it's an audit line. If you need a heat gun and a prayer to get a panel off, that's a hit. If you can't separate a bearing from a tub, that's a hit. If a board is sitting under a steam vent with no protection, that's a hit. Over time, those hits cost sales. It's not instant, but it adds up. Of course, pushback arrived dressed as safety and IP, just like here. Some brands leaned on software locks, arguing that unauthorized resets could bypass crucial protections. Some buried pairing routines deeper in dealer tools, but regulators and courts started drawing a line. Safety is valid, gatekeeping basic diagnosis is. So you see compromises. Service modes accessible with button codes, PDFs that outline tests, portals where independent shops can buy access without pledging fealty to one brand. Here's a micro story. A Paris repair co-op gets a Bosch washer with a dead pump. 5 years ago, they'd fight forums for a manual. Now they log into a paid but open portal, print the pump test, order the exact impeller assembly with the right gasket, and swap it that afternoon. The machine passes self-test, no pairing drama, customer pays far less than a new unit, and the washer avoids the skip. Nothing heroic, just a normal fix made possible by rules. The France index did show cracks. Because manufacturers score themselves within a formula, some gamed the math, great on documentation, less great on part prices. Advocacy groups called it out. The government tweaked guidance and, more importantly, signaled a durability index is coming next, so you don't just rate ease of fix, you rate how long it tends to last. Shine light, then sharpen it. Let's be honest, Europe isn't a repair utopia. There are still sealed tubs out there. Software still runs the show, and certain brands try to make pro-only info a maze. But the arc bent when a sales tag says 6 and the one next to it says 8.6. Shoppers ask why. When a tech can buy the manual without a backdoor, they stay in business. When parts must exist for 10 years, a landfill loses a little pile every week. Meanwhile, something else was happening in boardrooms. Fixability scores became marketing. We're an 8.9 this year. That pressure rolls backward into engineering. A designer swaps rivets for screws because the score matters. A buyer negotiates better part pricing because the index dings them for gouging. It's not vibes, it's a spreadsheet. The thing the Phoebus mindset understood, numbers push behavior, finally works for the other side. So what does this mean for you, standing in a US big box store? It means there's proof of concept. Laws can crack the lock, labels can steer demand, parts can be stocked, manuals can exist. And when they do, families spend less, small shops live, and machines run longer. Europe called the bluff. Now the only question is who writes the rules here. Rising tension. The Phoenix strategy exposed. While Europe poked holes in the wall, something slick kept rolling here. The Phoenix strategy. Think of it as corporate reincarnation. A product line dies on schedule, rises with a new face, and you're told it's progress. New color, new app, new cycle names. Underneath, a lot of the bones stay the same weak bearings, same board layout by the steam vent, but the badge is fresh and the price nudges up. Talk about deja vu with a receipt. Here, how the refresh trick hides in plain sight. Marketing throws a launch every 12 to 18 months. The old model number goes discontinued. Service manuals and parts listings get shuffled into archives no one can find. A near clone with a couple firmware tweaks replaces it on the floor. Reviewers gush over improved algorithms and a brighter display. But the meaningful stuff, access, serviceability, thermal protection, stays untouched. It's a costume change sold as a new cast. Price anchoring does the rest. You see a base model at an eye-grabbing number, say $599. The mid-tier sits at $899, now with sanitize and Wi-Fi. The top tier, $1,299, Pro Care. But here's the trap. The cheap one carries the same fragile control board as the fancy one, and that board costs almost the same to replace. So when it fails, the repair quote lands at a third to half the cost of a new machine, no matter what tier you bought. The anchor drags either way. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, cost accountants do something clever. They shave pennies off critical parts over multiple refreshes. Thinner conformal coat on the board, narrower motor windings, cheaper door latch spring. Each change is tiny, defensible, within spec. Across a few cycles, the safety margin shrinks. Failures cluster right after the warranty window. You call it bad luck. They call it actuarial alignment. Here, where it really stings, the midpoint crisis. You pay more and get less durability because features ate the budget. Big glossy screen, touch slider, chime packs. The money that used to buy thicker traces, heat sinking, or a gasket that actually seals now funds the front panel. So you end up with a premium unit whose guts are flimsier than last year's mid-range. It looks nicer dying. Warranty math locks in the feeling. Brands know the failure curve. They tune base warranties to slip under the first wave of trouble, then sell you an extended plan priced on the average household's pain tolerance. The plan covers headline disasters, not the soft failures, creeping sensor drift, ghost codes, random lockups that force repeated visits. And there's a kicker. Even if the part is covered, labor and trip fees stack until you're halfway to a new machine. You nod, buy the plan, and still spend Saturdays waiting for a tech. Now zoom out. The Phoenix strategy isn't just about selling one more washer. It's about smoothing revenue for years. New model every year, steady accessory sales, predictable parts margins, financed purchases that feed interest income. Retail partners love it because they can stage clearance events every spring, then restock with new units that cost them the same. Shareholders love it because quarterly growth looks steady. You, on the other hand, keep buying the same problem in a different shirt. What nobody tells you, this cycle shapes supply chains. When model numbers churn, contract manufacturers can swap vendors for subparts without building long-term quality. A pump that was decent gets replaced by one that's barely adequate, but the spec sheet says meets flow at room temp. There's no penalty for choosing the cheaper vendor if the product lives past its warranty target. And when it doesn't, the part's discontinued tag pushes you to replace the whole unit anyway. Planned scarcity becomes a profit center. Here's a micro story. A buyer at a big box sees two offers from the same factory for the next-gen dishwasher. Board A with thicker protection costs $6 more. Board B with less coating costs $4 less. Across a run of 300,000 units, that's a $3 million swing. They pick Board B a year later. Service calls spike in humid states. The vendor blames misuse. The brand releases a revision with a small shield added for pennies. Your old unit. Sorry, discontinued. And then there's subscription logic woven into refreshes. Want smart diagnostics? Pay to enable. Want the Steam cycle? That's a microtransaction. Even consumables get monthly plans. Official filters by mail with chips that keep the flow high, while third-party filters trigger a nag screen and a trickle. It's death by 1,000 toggles, each dressed up as convenient. To be fair, some upgrades are real. Quieter motors, better balancing, lower water use, those matter, but watch the ratio. If the refresh adds one meaningful fix and 5 glossy distractions and the fragility stays, you're funding a carousel. The Phoenix rises, wings painted, same brittle bones. Meanwhile, something else was happening in your head. You start timing your trust. 3 years in, you flinch at every beep. You stop loading the washer late at night because you don't want to find a locked door at 6 a.m. that's not just annoyance, it's control. The brand trained you to expect failure and accept replacement as normal. They built a culture where keeping it running feels like a hobby, not a right. This was the turn. The plan seemed like progress, but it quietly turned durable goods into seasonal buys. It normalized churn, hid the true price in parts and plans, and made you grateful when a machine just did its job. Which begs the next question. If this is the business model, what's the tab for the planet carrying the scrap? Mountains of metal. The hidden cost of e-waste? So if the Phoenix strategy trains you to toss and rebuy, where does the old stuff go? Follow the truck. Behind the big box store, there's a fenced pad stacked with dead fridges and washers. Forklifts shuffle metal like playing cards. A few units get tagged refurb. Most sit, waiting for a ride to somewhere you'll never see. Here's the shift that snuck up on us. Appliances used to be just metal and motors. Now they're electronics with hoses. That one change drops them into the e-waste bucket, where recycling is harder and more expensive. You've got steel wrapped around plastic foam, foam glued to liners, boards pressed with mixed metals, and wires coated in halogenated jackets. Disassembly isn't a wrench job, it's surgery. You might be surprised to learn how fast that pile grows. In 2022, the world made about 62 million tons of e-waste. That's phones, TVs, laptops, and yeah, smart appliances. Only a slice gets properly recycled. The rest, some goes to landfills that weren't built for electronics. Some gets reused. A magic word that often means exported with a wink and a customs code that hides the truth. Let's walk the line. A hauler picks up your broken washer. It hits a sorting yard. Someone pops a board for copper and precious metal recovery, a few grams of value in a palm-sized square. The steel cabinet looks like the big win, but foam insulation clings and adhesives fight back. Clean steel fetches a price. Sticky mixed scrap doesn't, so yards cherry-pick and move on. The math says don't linger. Meanwhile, landfill crews deal with the part nobody advertises: fires. E-waste piles run hot because lithium sneaks in. A forgotten power bank inside a junk drawer, a battery in a tossed toy, a cordless tool pack wedged under a dryer. Mix heat, pressure, and a spark, and you've got a stubborn fire that burps toxic smoke for days. People living downwind don't get a brochure. They get headaches and warnings to keep kids inside. Here's a micro story. A port in West Africa receives a container labeled used goods. The manifest lists refrigerators, washers, parts. Local traders crack it open. Half the units don't power up. A few are fixable with parts that aren't in the box. The rest become donors on the spot, cannibalized in a yard with no capture for refrigerants, no plan for foams, no bins for boards. Coolant hisses into hot air. Foam dust goes underfoot. The steel finally sells, but the poisons stay local. To be fair, there are certified recyclers who do it right. They drain refrigerants, shred with separation systems, capture dust, and send boards to smelters that recover gold, silver, palladium. That path costs more. It needs volume, compliance, and buyers who pay a premium to sleep at night. But in a race to cut pennies, supply chains lean toward the cheaper door. Loose oversight makes it easy. And here's the bitter twist. Energy wins can hide waste losses. A new fridge uses less electricity than Grandpa's Beast, sure. But if it dies at year 8 and the foam, boards, and coolants don't get handled right, the climate math gets messy. You saved power at home while someone else breathed the cost at a dump. Recycling myths don't help. People hear we recycle everything and picture a neat loop. Actual recovery rates lag because design ignores end of life. Glue beats screws, tubes bury wires, coatings contaminate streams. You can't pull clean fractions out of a glued sandwich, so value drops and with it the incentive to try. What nobody knew at the checkout was how the lockdown washer in your laundry room could end up as a smoky plume a continent away. Planned churn doesn't just hit your wallet. It writes a script for waste managers, scrap dealers, dock workers, and kids playing near burn pits. The story doesn't end when the receipt fades. It ends when the last toxic crumb breaks down. And at the current pace, that's a long wait. The money machine. Follow the incentives. While that smoke drifts from the scrap pile, follow the money trail back upstream. This is where the story stops being about bad luck and starts sounding like a spreadsheet speaking out loud. Profit on parts beats profit on the product itself. I mean, seriously, selling you a washer once is fine. Selling you control boards, pumps, filters, door locks, and extended plans for a decade, that's gravy. A board that costs maybe $20 to $30 to make leaves the warehouse at $200, maybe $300 because it's specialized and you're stuck. Pumps are the same game. Cheap guts, pricey replacement, and a failure curve tuned to nudge you before year 5. Stores make margin on those parts. Brands make more. Service networks get a slice every visit. Here's a fun fact. The service model is priced to push replacement over repair. A factory tech visit might start at $150 for the trip, $100 for diagnosis, then we'll need to order the part, which means a second trip fee plus labor. You're halfway to a new unit before anyone turns a screw. And when the quote lands near $400 for a mid-tier machine, the sales team materializes with rebates and haul away. They don't have to tell you not to fix it. The math does. Meanwhile, retail finance turns the crank. Buy now, pay later, 18 months, no interest if paid in full. Your brain hears free time, but stack that across multiple replacements and the lifetime consumer cost of churn hits around $40,000 to $50,000. Not luxury upgrades, just staying even. The store gets financing kickbacks, the brand locks another install base, and you add one more payment to the kitchen drawer calendar. Unknown to most people, parts logistics are a profit center too. Brands outsource warehousing to third parties that charge handling on each pick and pack, then add rush fees when your kitchen floods and you beg for overnight shipping. Scarcity gets priced in. A discontinued tag shows up right when failure rates climb, which magically shifts you from repair buyer to appliance buyer. Inventory risk transferred to you. Shareholder pressure turns the screws behind all this. Every quarter needs a line that goes up. Durability fights that. If machines lasted like Grandpa's, you'd buy fewer, which looks bad on an earnings call. So incentive plans reward margin expansion through accessories, parts, and services. Engineers ask for a better gasket. Finance asks what it does for the quarter. If the answer is it reduces callbacks in year 6, it dies in the meeting. If the answer is it creates a consumable, it lives. Here's a micro story. A product manager presents 2 paths for the next-gen dryer. Beef up the heat shield under the control panel or ship as is and bundle a premium protection plan at checkout. The shield costs $2 a unit and avoids thermal soak that fries boards in humid garages. The plan sells for $199 and statistically pays out less than it takes in. The room picks the plan. 6 months later, reviews mention random resets and unresponsive panel after summer. The plan attaches to more carts. Revenue smiles. Let's talk dealer incentives. Independent retailers get spiffs, cash bonuses, for moving certain models, often the ones with the fattest parts ecosystem and attachment opportunities. They're not evil, they're surviving. When a brand promises an extra 100 per unit if you hit a target, the floor demo shifts. The sales script leans toward the model that later buys a lot of service calls. You ask which one lasts, they pivot to features. Meanwhile, authorized service networks follow playbooks that tilt toward assembly swaps. Time on task gets capped. If diagnosis passes 20 minutes, replace the module. Why? Because troubleshooting down to a burned resistor risks no fix, callbacks that ruin metrics. Replacing the whole card is cleaner for the dashboard and pricier for you. The tech hates it, but the system grades him on throughput, not artistry. You might be surprised to learn how marketing turns even failure into funnel fuel. Email campaigns trigger at estimated end of life, nudging upgrade time. Apps ping new cycle pack available while you're still mad about last week's lockout. Loyalty points sweeten the sting, 10% back if you stay in the family. The trap feels like a hug. To be fair, some companies try to thread the needle, better seals, longer part windows, decent manuals. They don't get splashy headlines for that. They get a quieter service department and fewer repeat sales. On Wall Street, that reads as slower growth. So the loud strategy wins, keep you spinning with accessories, insurance, and refreshes. This was the reveal hiding in plain sight. The money isn't in making one great machine. It's in building an ecosystem where every failure, every filter, every frightened warranty purchase feeds a steady stream. Once you see those incentives, the design choices stop looking clumsy. They look intentional. And the next time a board dies after the grace period, you'll hear the spreadsheet of failure. Welcome back. 10 common breakpoints. All right, let's pop the hood and walk through the failure map. The spots that tank most modern washers, dryers, fridges, and dishwashers. Not theory. The 10 breakpoints you'll see again and again. First, control boards. Heat plus moisture equals chaos. Panels live behind glossy bezels that trap steam. Cheap capacitors dry out, traces corrode, conformal coat misses a corner, and suddenly you've got ghost faults, random resets, dead screens, codes that clear themselves then come back at 2 a.m. old world. Swap a switch. New world, $200 300 brain transplant that may need pairing. 2. Bearings and seals. These are wear parts, no shame in that, but sealed tubs turn a $20 bearing set into a $600 assembly. Water sneaks past a lip seal, grease washes out, races grind, and the drum starts howling. In a split tub, you'd press new bearings and a seal. In a welded tub, you buy the whole bathtub. Labor stacks. People replace the machine. 3. Pumps and valves. Dishwashers and washers run cheap motors with thin shafts and bushings. A hair tie or grit loads the impeller, amperage climbs, the driver chip flags overcurrent, and some brands lock the unit until a service reset. Even when you free the clog, the board remembers the scare. Drain pumps also hate heat, run dry a few times and they cook. They're simple, but they're set up to fail loudly. 4. Heating elements and their sensors. Dryers bake boards if air paths clog and thermostats don't react fast. Water heaters in dishwashers rely on thermistors that drift with age. A tiny drift, the board thinks you're overheating, kills the element and throws a hard stop. Now you get cold washes or a unit that won't start until a code clears in service mode. 5. Door locks and latches. Plastic cams, thin springs, tight tolerances. A little flex, a bit of deterrent creep, and the lock micro switch goes flaky. On washers, the board treats that like a jail break, stops mid-cycle, refuses to unlock, and forces a manual release through a tiny pull cord hidden behind a kick panel. Replace the lock, sure, but some models want a handshake. 6. Water inlet filters and flow meters. City grit clogs the mesh, flow drops, the board reads no fill, then panics and shuts off heat to protect the element. People yank out filters to get running, and debris heads downstream to valves and pumps. Flow meters with gummed paddles miscount and cause overfills or stalls. You're fixing plumbing math disguised as electronic. 7. Gaskets, boots, and hoses. Rubber meets bleach meets heat. Boots on front loaders tear at the same crease where coins and bra wires rub. A tiny nick grows into a leak that ruins bearings, boards, and floors before you notice. Replacement should be a quick stretch and clip. On some models, it's a full front panel removal with hidden screws and glue. Weeks for the right boot because the size is just off enough to kill generic. 8. Fans and airflow in fridges and dryers. Evaporator fan sees from frost or bad bearings, then coils ice up, airflow stops, temps rise, and food dies. In dryers, a kinked vent cooks elements and soaks boards. A $15 thermal fuse pops and saves the day, unless it's soldered into an assembly you're not meant to replace. And if the board controls fan speed with a driver that overheats, you're swapping silicon, not blades. 9. Sensors, hall sensors, pressure switches, reed switches. These are the eyes and ears. They drift or get wet. A tiny variance pushes readings out of the software's tight comfort zone. The tub is empty when it's not. The motor stalls when it's fine. Older machines shrugged. Modern logic throws an unrecoverable fault. You need a code dance or paid app to teach the board that the new sensor is okay. 10. Connectors and harnesses. Vibration plus cheap plastic locks equals intermittent opens. A door flexes, a harness rubs a sharp edge, insulation scuffs, and boom, random resets. Harnesses used to be clipped and tied with slack. Now they're taut, buried, and one brittle latch away from replace entire loom. Good luck snaking it behind a sealed tub. Meanwhile, material choices compound the pain. Thin PCB solder near relays cracks from heat cycling. A $2 relabel and a reflow would fix it, but policy says no board-level repair. Mounting boards under steam vents, packing elements tight with no airflow, gluing panels that need service twice in a decade, those are choices. So is stashing a pump behind a welded base plate, then calling it non-serviceable? Here's a quick tour through how these stack in real life. Washer starts with a tiny door bootnick. Slow leak wets the lower harness. Corrosion bumps resistance. Board sees weird readings from the pressure sensor, calls overfill, and stops mid-cycle with a locked door. You force it open, water spills, hits the board shelf. Now you've got a boot, harness, and board in play. The quote crosses half the price of a new unit. You fold. Or a fridge, a cheap fan bearing squeals, stalls, coils freeze, temps creep, the compressor runs longer, the start relay heats and cracks a solder joint. Board gets flaky. You thaw it, it runs a week, then dies again. The fix should be a $12 fan and a reflow. Instead, it's a fan, a board, and if you're unlucky, a compressor start kit you didn't need, because the real culprit was a cold solder and a bad fan spec. To be fair, not every machine hits all 10. Some brands shield boards, use screws, keep split tubs, and stock parts. You can spot them by how boring their service calls are. But across the mass market, these breakpoints are built in by habit and cost cutting. Learn the map and you can see failure coming and plan your counter. The Toolkit, how you win without waiting. So let's flip it. If the game is stacked, how do you play to win anyway? Here's the field guide people use when they're tired of bleeding cash and time. First rule, buy for repair, not for features. You want screws, not glue. Split tubs, not welded. Mechanical latches, not brittle plastic cams. Look for models with replaceable bearings, accessible pumps, and control boards mounted away from steam. If a showroom unit has a removable back panel with standard fasteners you can actually see, that's a green flag. If you spot plastic welds around the tub seam or a board under a vent, that's a pass. Use repair scores and crowd data like night vision goggles. In Europe, that's the repairability index on the tag. Here, triangulate. Check teardown sites, parts stores, and forums for your exact model number. You're hunting 3 signals: parts in stock for common failures, service manuals in the wild, and routine fixes that don't require dealer pairing. If you can buy a pump, a door lock, and a control panel with no call for availability, you're safer. If the manual exists and shows service mode steps, even better. Here's a trick: search model number, service manual PDF, and model number parts list before you buy. If you can't find either, ask the retailer to email them. If they can't, they just told you the future. Also check board photos. Does it have conformal coating, standoffs that keep it off the damp metal, and a shield from steam? Or is it naked under plastic? The difference is years. Skip the new cheap trap. Open box, refurb, and pro-grade used gear often beats shiny budget lines. Commercial light-duty washers with split tubs and bolt-on pumps are boring in the best way. They're louder, heavier, and built to be fixed. Pair that with a warranty from a reputable refurbisher, not a mystery seller. And don't sleep on older, last-gen units that share parts with current models. Same guts, lower price, longer parts runway. Build a local repair network before you need it. Find the independent shop that actually answers the phone and fixes boards at the component level when it's safe. Ask them what brands and models they like to service. Their short list is gold. Bring them coffee, write a review, send friends. Keeping that shop alive pays you back every time something hiccups. And if they're swamped, ask for their recommended DIY resources and part suppliers. When you do buy, document everything from day one. Serial numbers, receipts, install dates, error codes, photos of leaks, videos of weird noises. Keep a simple folder on your phone. If a failure hits inside warranty, that record turns will get to you into action. If it hits just outside, you can argue for goodwill coverage because you've got a timeline. Don't guess, send the video. Force the warranty to work for you. The 1975 Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act says opening a case or using third-party parts doesn't void coverage unless the company proves your work caused the damage. So if a rep waves a scary sticker, stay calm. Ask them to note in writing that your action caused the failure. They usually won't. Escalate politely, cite the law, and copy the retailer. Brands hate paper trails to the Federal Trade Commission. You don't need to be a lawyer, just be organized. Parts pairing, beat it with planning. Before something fails, figure out if your model needs software to pair common components. If yes, make friends with a shop that has access or hunt for the specific parts that ship pre-initialized. Some pumps and locks come with universal firmware that auto-learns. Also learn your machine's service mode key dance. Many brands leave a button combo to clear soft faults and run tests. That alone can turn a dead unit into a running one after a sensor swap. Stock a tiny kit that punches above its weight. Nut drivers, torque set, hose clamp pliers, multimeter, zip ties, quality butyl tape, plumber's putty, spare inlet hoses, and a real flashlight. Add a cheap endoscope camera that plugs into your phone. It saves you from blind disassembly when a coin lives behind a pump. Toss in a surge protector or line conditioner for the washer and fridge. Brownouts kill boards. Clean power buys years. Water and airflow are life. Put mesh screens on inlets, flush them twice a year, and actually level your washer so it doesn't beat its bearings to death. In dryers, clean the full vent path, not just the lint screen. If the run is long, add a booster fan rated for lint. In fridges, vacuum the condenser coils. Boring maintenance stops dramatic failures. Buy spares before scarcity hits. Grab a door boot, a drain pump, a latch, and a fan motor for models you plan to keep. Prices are sane while the model is current. They go wild or vanish right after. Label the box with the model number and stash it. You just turned a week-long wait into a Saturday fix. Use payment leverage. Pay with a card that doubles the manufacturer warranty or adds coverage for defects. Register the product with the brand and your card. When something fails at month 13, call the card benefits line with your neat folder of proof. They'll often reimburse a repair or even a replacement. It's not charity, it's a perk you already paid for. Finally, shop with your voice. Ask the salesperson, what's the parts availability window on this model? If they blink, say, how about the service manual, where can I download it? You're sending a message. If enough people ask, managers tell vendors and vendors tell engineers. That pressure is how screws beat glue again. You can't control the incentives in a boardroom today, but you can choose designs built to be fixed, keep receipts that bite, and feed the local shops that keep you out of landfills. That's how you win without waiting. The policy path. How rules shift markets. So can rules actually crack this? Short answer, yes, if they hit the right levers. In the States, the first real push isn't federal. It's states drawing lines and daring others to cross them. State-level right to repair laws start simple. If you sell it here, you need to sell parts, manuals, and tools to fix it. Some early wins focused on phones and farm gear, but the blueprint works for appliances too. The key clauses are boring and mighty: reasonable part prices, access to diagnostic software on fair terms, and no locking features behind dealer-only handshakes when they're needed for a basic fix. Even with carve-outs, those bills shift conversations in boardrooms, because one state's rule becomes a national headache if you try to run two playbooks. Here's where it gets practical. When a state requires parts for 7 years after sale, a procurement team signs contracts with warehouses. That means pumps, gaskets, latches, and boards actually exist when failure waves hit. When a state requires docks, a PDF library gets spun up with exploded diagrams and fault code trees. You can call that compliance. A repair shop calls it oxygen. Meanwhile, the Federal Trade Commission steps in with the hammer it already has. In 2021, the FTC's Nixing the Fix report put brands on notice. Scary warranty language and repair restrictions can be an unfair practice. Since then, they've sent warning letters about warranty void if removed, stickers, and brought cases when companies tied warranties to authorized service. It's not theater. Companies quietly change web pages and owners' manuals when the FTC shows teeth, because a consent decree lingers for years. Then you've got the Environmental Protection Agency, which doesn't write repair rules but owns the waste problem. When e-waste numbers spike, the EPA can tighten disposal standards, push extended producer responsibility at the state level, or back grants for community repair hubs that keep devices out of dumps. If disposal gets more expensive and public money rewards fixability, spreadsheets move. Brands start counting avoided waste like avoided fine. Municipalities, they're the sleeper cell. A city can't rewrite national warranty law, but it can choose what it buys. When a school district or a public works department bakes repairability into bids, parts must be stocked 10 years, manuals must be public, fasteners must be standard, vendors bend. 100 such bids across the country turns into a soft national policy that costs taxpayers less and teaches manufacturers a new habit. We win when we're fixable. Here's a micro story. A county facilities team specs washers for shelters and jails. The bid demands split tubs, screw-fastened panels, and an open service portal. 2 big brands balk. A third says yes, wins the contract, and learns they can sell that spec to hospitals too. 6 months later, the same design rolls into retail with a service-friendly badge because marketing saw an angle. One dry paragraph in a county bid nudged a national SKU. Class actions and lemon law style claims add bite from the other side. When a design flaw, say sealed tubs that nuke bearings early, sparks a wave of failures lawyers file. Settlements force extended warranties, free repairs, or refunds. Brands hate this not just for the payout, but for discovery, memos, test data, timelines. The sunlight hurts, so the next time an engineer asks for a better seal, the cost of saying no includes potential class action. Suddenly, the gasket looks cheap. Of course, the lobby fights back. Safety and intellectual property become shields. You'll hear we can't share diagnostic software. It could disable fire protection. Sometimes that's true. But regulators can split the baby, let shops access tests and resets without exposing dangerous overrides, require parts pairing info for benign components like pumps and fans, keep lockouts for heat without locking basic function behind paid tools. Europe's already shown that line exists. What nobody expected is how fast market signals follow labels. If a few states adopt visible repair ratings, like France's shelf tag, big retailers start asking for the score nationwide because they don't want 12 planograms. That pushes brands to harmonize up, not down. Even a voluntary scorecard posted online can shift sales. Shoppers love simple numbers. This one's an 8.2. Done. So can rules shift markets? They already are. State bills pry doors open. Federal cops scare off the worst tricks. Cities write specs that make screws beat glue. Courts raise the cost of cute failures. Each lever sounds dull. Together they make a path where a fix is normal, not a favor. Which brings us to the fork we all stand at. Keep funding churn or make built to be fixed the price of entry. The break or bend moment. So here we are at the fork that decides what your next 10 years look like. On one side, a repair economy. On the other, a disposable one. The Phoenix playbook keeps humming either way. The question is who it serves. Picture 2 futures running in parallel. In the first, we bend the curve toward repair. You walk into a store and, like France, there's a big number on the tag, 8.4, 6.1, telling you how fixable each machine is. Brands stock parts for 10 years because states made them. Manuals live on public portals. Split tubs are normal again. Door boots and fans are weekend swaps, not 4-week odysseys. Your local shop has the service codes they need without begging a portal. The lifespan creeps back up, not to fairy tale forever, but to something sane. 12, 15 years for a fridge, a decade for a washer if you treat it right. Families keep thousands that would have gone to churn. Small techs hire apprentices. Landfills cool off a notch. In the second, we break toward churn. Locks get tighter. Pairing spreads from pumps to heaters to safety-certified door latches. Diagnostics move behind subscriptions. Parts windows shrink because model years flip faster. The friendly sticker still says Energy Star, but the end-of-life story gets uglier. More exports labeled used, more scrap fires, more quiet bills buried in fees. Your calendar fills with 2-hour service windows and your credit card with plans that feel like insurance but function like rent. We normalize 7-year fridges and 4-year washers the way we normalized disposable razors and phone upgrades. You stop expecting long life from anything with a cord. Manufacturers have their fork, too, designed for service or designed for churn. A service-first path sounds boring in the boardroom. Screws, split tubs, boards shielded from steam, docks on day one, parts for a decade. But it builds brand trust, lowers warranty fights, and turns we last into a sales story that doesn't fade. Churn first is flashier. New bezels, new SKUs, sweetened attachment rates. It feeds quarters until a class action hits or a state law closes the door. Then you reboot the strategy with a new buzzword and hope no one notices. And this is the quietest, hardest fork. Spend once well or spend forever on junk. It's not about asceticism. It's about seeing the trap and stepping sideways. Buy the model with screws, not glue. Ask for the manual before you buy. Pre-order the pump you'll need in year 6. Support the shop that still fixes boards when it's safe. Vote, literally and with your cart, for the tag that says 8.6 instead of 5.2. Culture moves last, then all at once. pride in fixing used to live in garages and backyards. It can live there again, plus libraries, schools, co-ops, and YouTube benches. When your kid learns to clear a drain pump instead of tossing a washer, that's not nostalgia, that's resilience. When your neighbor borrows a torque set and returns a working dryer, you both remember that ownership means you decide when a thing is done, not a sticker or a code. Here's the truth that ties all of it. None of this is fake. The $1,000 meeting in Geneva was a choice. The sealed tub was a choice. The pairing handshake was a choice. Europe's shelf tag was a choice. We either keep letting the spreadsheet write the ending or we start writing it ourselves. Everything was about to change when people stopped treating failure as a shrug and started treating it as a vote. That's the break or bend moment, and it's sitting in your laundry room. This isn't bad luck. It's a business model that trained you to rent your own stuff by another name. If you want out, buy for repair, not for hype. Subscribe for more untold consumer playbooks and share this with the friends staring at a dead washer. Drop your repair scores and wins in the comments so others can pick the right gear. Want the deeper dive on which brands still use split tubs and standard fasteners? Watch the next episode. We